Welcome. Please have a seat.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. Good afternoon.
So you've been in this role as Minister of Industry for a few months now.
Yep.
Can you give us your early impressions of some of the most pressing challenges in your portfolio?
Well, first and foremost, it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to answer your tough questions. And I know that I'm here at a time where there's a lot of questioning, anxiety. And as the Minister of Industry, actually, and former Minister of Foreign Affairs, I wanted to leave the diplomatic front of the trade war to go to the economic front of it. I knew that we had been working on the causes. I wanted to work on the consequences and the solutions. And folks, I've seen this all around the world. I know that a lot can be done in international forums, but fundamentally, the next decade will be played in the plants and the businesses of our country. That's where the future will be actually solved to a certain extent. And so when I was given that portfolio, working with Prime Minister Carney, I thought I had to have a clear, strategy, and here are my 3 priorities. My first priority is actually taking care of the front lines of this trade war. And you guys are part of one of the front lines. The 3 front lines are auto, steel, and aluminum. And that's why, really quickly, I was at GM in Oshawa, meeting with the steelmaker, the automakers, with GM, obviously, with the management, but also with the workers. And that's why also I've been working a lot with the steelmakers in Hamilton last week and the aluminum sector also in Bécancour, Quebec. So that's my first priority. So basically you have to remember, well, Minister Joly's first priority is auto. Second priority, we need to grow the economy while we're dealing with this trade war. It's a huge undertaking. But we can do that through 3 main things within my own portfolio. Is a defense industrial strategy, and I'll talk to you more about that, AI, tech, and also energy. And thirdly, because I'm in charge also of research and science, we need to bring the best and the brightest in the US that are in the universities and that are affected by academic freedom. So we will get 1,000 researchers from the US and we will bring them to Canada. These are my 3 priorities.
Let's talk a little bit about Canada-US relations. Yeah. How has that relationship changed from your last portfolio to this one?
So I think that we're seeing a lot of unpredictability, to say the least. Some would say chaos. But what is clear is that the trade rules are being rewritten as we speak. And we may be living in a world with many tariffs for the next decade or decades. The question is, as we speak, there are economic blocks that are being organized. And in which economic bloc will we be? And it will depend on, obviously, how the government negotiates, but also fundamentally how businesses will adapt to the changes. So right now, we are working with the US to have a security and trade deal, because more than ever, both need to go along and work together. But we also have, as a government, a strategy which is fight, protect, build. Fight with countermeasures, and at this point, we're the only countries that have put as many counter tariffs and the only other country is China. So we'll continue to do so, and we have leverage because we're the biggest client of the US. And we have many allies within the American society as well. The second one is protect. So how do you protect? Well, you protect your people. We've done some enhancements to EI. We're providing many more liquidities. We're working with the sector, for example, we have a $2 billion fund to help the auto sector that we need to make sure that we materialize. And at the same time, we need to make sure that we protect our domestic market. And built is what you've seen from the government. Yesterday, you saw that we would be investing $9 billion within this fiscal year on defense. I know that defense procurement can help the auto sector, and I'll get back to that. But also, we are really making sure that we will speed up major projects. We need to make sure that we create jobs across this country, and it's through major infrastructure projects that we will do so. So, you know, we can't be only reactive to what's going on in the US, that's my point. We need to take care of our own, you know, of our own reality, of our own future, and that's why we're going ahead very quickly.
There have been big investments in Canada in the last few years, especially when it comes to the EV value chain.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of issues with this. You know, of course, the combination of slower growth in EV demand and the trade challenges is really putting pressure on the sector. So what are your thoughts on Canada's approach to supporting the EV transition, and is everything still in line the way it was?
Yeah. So we took a decision some years ago to really invest in this EV supply chain. It was an industrial policy decision, a big one. And we thought we could do so for many reasons, because of course we had access to the critical minerals, and we had talent, we had green energy. So we worked with a couple of companies to make sure that they would invest in Canada. But not only did we support these investments, but these investments that we've supported are particularly important as their battery plants. Battery plants are good for the EV sector, but they're good also for other sectors of the economy. And so that is something that we're looking at, because essentially they can be applicable to many industrial sectors that need basically energy in a box, which is a battery. So I want you to think about that, because it's not only linked to EVs. Now, I know I'm obviously talking to all of you in the auto sector, and we still think that the EV sector is important. We think that looking in 10, 15 years, the transition may have been a bit bumpy, particularly at a time of trade challenges, but it is necessary. And that's why we will continue to support you as the transition happens. Why do we think that's the case? We think that's the case because the international market is there. And we know particularly other countries that are countries that Canada doesn't see necessarily eye to eye with are actually very strong when it comes to electric vehicles. And it's the government's decision to make sure that these vehicles doesn't come into the country. But we're doing that at a time where we think also that we can help the industry basically transit. So it goes both ways. We're protecting our domestic market. We're investing in the transition, yes. In our platform, we said that we would bring back EV subsidies. I think it's really important. It will have an impact on demand. We're willing to put money where our mouth is to make sure that we're investing in these battery plants. But in the end, we think that everybody needs to be able to work on this to make it a success. And I know that the Americans are taking another decision, but we still believe that we want to get to a net zero reality, net zero economy environment by 2030, by 2050, I'm sorry. And that's why we think that this entire vision of protecting the environment while investing in our economy is fundamental. Now, I'm a very pragmatic person. I've been able to survive as Foreign Affairs Minister for some time. I'm willing to have conversations. I'm willing to see what are the much more difficult issues at a time where I know that basically you're on one of the front lines. So my point is, let's have that conversation. But I really think that we should not, while we're thinking short term and trying to deal with just 25% of completely unjustified, illegal, unlawful tariffs, that we can't think about also how we'll end up on the other side of this difficult chapter we're going through.
How do we navigate this? Because it's going to be a difficult 4 years, to say the least.
Well, I think one day at a time. I think we live in the best country on earth. Not only because I think, you know, I'm a politician being on the stage, guys, because I've done 55 countries in the past 3 years and a half, and I've been able to compare. I really think we live in the best country on earth. I think we have everything every single country dreams of. We have the energy, full different types of source of energy, conventional and green. We have the talent, we have the capital, we have the social safety net, we have basically the cohesion. But guys, fundamentally, why our society is so strong, I think, while it's really not perfect, we have trust. Canada is a country that you can look in the eyes, shake hands, and know we'll follow the contract. This is gold. That's why, while the US will become weaker, we will become stronger. We need to do this at a pace never seen since the Second World War. We need to invest more than we ever thought we would be doing. But I'm here as your ally to do that. I'm here to help calm down the anxiety and think ahead, because we're all in this together, and I'm convinced that we will prevail.
How is it as a woman at the negotiating table? It must be tough because
how is it to, as a woman, to interview me? No, but
like in a male-dominated field.
Yeah. Like, I think it's an asset. Mm-hmm. I think that, like, I've been in different types of societies where it was much more guys and men in front of me, but in the end, we're human beings, and you know, you can work on being tough, you can work on charming them, you can work different ways, but ultimately, you need to win the negotiation, and that's what we'll do.
And what can we expect next?
So, this week will be an important week, folks. The President of the United States of America is coming to Canada, in Kananaskis. He won't be alone. It will be the G7. The G7 is the most important group in the world of leaders. He'll be joined also by various leaders, including some from Saudi Arabia, from Korea, from Mexico, from India. The conversations happening there will be about different things, geopolitics, but also the economy. I think that the President Trump's idea is to make sure that there is less war in the world. We'll see whether that happens. But I think that fundamentally, the big question is, how will trade be organized in the world? And we can't wait for just countries to organize themselves. We need to be on the ground working with our companies and our industries to organize ourselves, to then say how we will organize our trade in the world. That's why I wanted to go back on the ground and work with you guys, because the next decade will be about economic security. And the auto sector is a fundamental industry to us. We had an auto sector before the Auto Pact in 1965. We will have one after this, for sure. But we may have to organize ourselves differently. And I know that there are many companies that have linked to the US right now. We need to work together. We need to put pressure together. We need to make sure that ultimately the White House and the President understand that we can work together to compete against China, to compete against other countries that are not following the trade rules, that we're not the problem, that actually we're in solution mode. There's no trade deficit when it comes to auto. There's no trade deficit when it comes to manufacturing. And I think that we can get there, but at the same time, we need to work all together.
Thank you, Minister Joly, for taking the time and for supporting, helping support our auto industry. Good luck next week.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. How are you? Oui, merci. Très bien. So it's a pleasure to be here, to be in Vaughan, to meet with the auto industry. Of course, we know that the auto industry is going through tough times, to say the least. Right now, they're dealing with U.S. tariffs of 25% that are completely unjustified and unjustifiable, unlawful, illegal. I could go on with many adjectives. You get my point. And our strategy has been from the get-go to fight, protect, build. So really fighting back with strong counter tariffs to make sure we protect our industries, including a $2 billion support fund for the auto sector, and of course, supporting our workers. And finally, we will build. We'll build through our defense investments. You heard the Prime Minister yesterday. We will get to 2% of GDP in defense investments in the country by the end of fiscal year. That means more than $9 billion, and that includes investment in our defense industrial capacity that could in turn help the auto sector. So I'm here in good faith as an ally to the auto sector, understanding the challenges, but also being in solution mode. Donc, ça me fait plaisir de répondre à vos questions en français et en anglais. Est-ce que en français un petit peu ou non? CBC, is there? Yeah? OK. Donc, je suis ici à Vaughan parce que, on sait, il y a une crise dans le domaine de l'automobile. Il y a des tarifs injustifiés et illégaux qui ont été imposés par l'administration américaine qui font en sorte d'avoir un impact réel sur le secteur de l'automobile ici en Ontario. Notre objectif est encore et toujours le même, c'est-à-dire de nous défendre, de nous battre, de nous défendre et de nous protéger. Donc, on se bat en imposant des contre-mesures, des contre-tarifs très, très importants, aussi importants en fait que d'autres pays, incluant la Chine. Deuxièmement, nous allons continuer à nous protéger. Nous avons un fonds de 2 milliards de dollars pour aider le secteur de l'automobile qui est durement affecté. Et finalement, nous allons bâtir en investissant notamment dans le secteur de la défense. Il y a une annonce importante qui a été faite par le Premier ministre hier dans le domaine de la défense et cela aura un impact également pour le secteur automobile. It will be a pleasure to take your questions. Merci. Yes, hi, Dave.
I just have a quick question about the EV mandate to start.
Yeah.
Obviously, we heard GM earlier this week say they want the EV mandate dropped. We heard it from Ford today. Is the federal government considering dropping the mandate?
So, I think our goal has been always the same, to get to net zero by 2050. We need to make sure that we take actions towards that, and that's why it was part of our vision and our plan to have EV mandates. I think also that what the government can do, which will help to increase the demand, is definitely making sure that we're bringing back EV subsidies. And that's in our platform. So we're looking forward to bring that back and, of course, continuing to engage with the auto sector that is going through a very difficult time. But I think that the auto sector is reacting to the fact that there's less demand than anticipated. I think that working on the demand side through subsidies will be helpful.
Right. And are you reconsidering the side of the, 2026, is 2026
I'm always willing to have conversations. As I said, in this beautiful room full of people, I'm a very pragmatic person. At the same time, I think that it's important that we continue to work with the sector and, to be frank, to press the sector to go much more and embrace the transition. It is important. Why? Because meanwhile, we know that other countries are really investing a lot in electric vehicles, including China. And right now, the government is preventing Chinese EVs to come into Canada to make sure that we're protecting our jobs, to make sure also that we're protecting our industries. But our industries need to continue to invest in greater R&D to get to par. Thanks. Yes. We spoke last week. Yeah. Good to see you finally.
Tell us more about what role the automakers will play in defense.
So I think that we're seeing already, for example, GM at Oshawa is producing vehicles for the Canadian Armed Forces. So we know that our Canadian Armed Forces need more vehicles, need to be able also to be protected better. There are different ways to make sure that ultimately they have the right equipment. I'm willing to have conversations with the aerospace sector, with the auto sector, with the AI sector, with, of course, steel and aluminum sectors, to make sure that ultimately through these defense investments, we're creating jobs at home in our different industries. What we want to do is to come up with a defense industrial policy in the coming months, where defense as a department and procurement and myself will be working together to be able to offer industries a range of demands on the part of the Canadian Armed Forces that in turn the industry can say, well, we're interested or we can, etc. We are in a wartime cabinet right now. We think in a way that we must build our defense capacity while dealing with a real threat to our economy. So that's how we're trying to create a new defense industrial base. And that's why I'm giving the example of Oshawa, but there could be other examples if the auto sector is coming to the table with solutions.
What talks have you had with
I can't hear you well, Neil.
Can you tell us what talks specifically you had with the automakers?
So I spoke to Labour today, so Unifor. I've spoken to many CEOs, actually, to all the CEOs in the auto sector. I've said that we would be increasing our defense spending. And that's what you saw yesterday. So I've already started this conversation. It was high-level conversation before the announcement by the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister announced yesterday that we would be investing $9 billion, $9.3 billion in Canada on defense before the end of the year. That's why conversations and negotiations will pick up. Thank you.
Mr. Shutley on CTV News. How close are we on a trade deal with the United States?
I know a lot of reporters are asking me this question, and obviously my answer is always the same. We won't negotiate in public. We'll let the Prime Minister do his work.
But on that note, we're hearing, Minister Fidelli from the province said just a little while ago that we're in the end game now. Premier Ford has been saying we're incredibly close. So is it the type of thing where we expect nothing next week, or are these active negotiations going on right now that we're making progress on? Because you have two sides happening here. People saying we could be in a tariff environment for quite some time. And then we're hearing that negotiations are close.
So I know that every single piece of information I could give you is gold on the negotiation. I won't. So my point is we won't negotiate in public. We will make sure that we fight for the best interest of Canada. The Prime Minister is doing his job. He is there trying to make sure that we have a trade and security deal. I think both goes hand in hand as we speak. And for the rest, we'll have more to say when we have things to say.
But they are happening right now.
Of course, the Prime Minister and the President are talking to each other. That's not news. We were there at the White House. We met with them. So, of course, this just is the reality of foreign leaders talking to each other.
Canada's exports to the United States automobiles fell by 23% in April.
Sorry, I can't hear you well.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sure. Canada's exports of automobiles to the United States fell by 23%.
Yeah.
Even if there is a new trade deal, is this down permanent?
Well, I know that the industry is going really tough times. I know there's a lot of anxiety right now. I understand that workers are asking themselves whether they'll continue to keep their job, keep their livelihoods. My job and the government's job is to make sure that they know that we will protect their jobs. And so that's why we came up with a very strong response, which in turn protects the auto sector. And that's why we have $2 billion worth of support for the sector. And I look forward to coming up with news regarding exactly what we'll be doing. But fundamentally, there was an auto industry before the Auto Pact in 1965. There will be after this. And I just want people watching us right now to know how much this is important for the government and how much we will fight for these jobs. And that's exactly why the Prime Minister is negotiating as we speak.
Are you going to take any action on steel dumping and
So on steel, I was just in conversation with the CEO of ArcelorMittal Dofasco a bit earlier today. I've talked to many CEOs in the steel industry. I was just in conversation also with the labor president of Unifor, Lana Payne. Of course, we will make sure that we protect our domestic market. Of course, we don't accept any countries having unfair practices that would harm our people, harm our industry, and that is why we will protect our market, and that's why we will fight against any form of dumping. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Kimberly Strong. Small question from a perspective of an SME.
Yeah,
Thank you for your support of the auto industry.
thank you.
I just want to know, how will you ensure that the funds go to the supply chain that is
Yeah.
feeding into the automotive sector? So we have our OEMs,
Yeah.
we have our big tier ones.
Yeah.
Underneath those, we have.
I'm very much, yeah. I know, and I'm very much aware of that. And that's why also we've been working with the regional development agencies. If you're in this region and you don't know FedDev yet, please do so, because FedDev is an organization that can help you out in terms of bridging your financing right now and help you out also sometimes pivot if you need to as a business. So this is what we will be doing. But of course, when it comes to the support to the industry of the $2 billion package, of course, I'll have more to say in the coming days and weeks on this. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.